Despite losing the second preseason game 4-2, there are some positives to take away for the Carolina Hurricanes. As of right now, we're just trying to see where all the guys are at and just make sure that they're kind of figuring out what they need to do as we get closer to the start of the regular season. So that being said, what did stand out in the game for the Carolina Hurricanes when it comes to Ehlers, Jarvis, and so much more? We'll talk about it on the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Like I said, for the Thursday edition of the show, we're going to be talking about the early chemistry between Nikolaj Ehlers, Seth Jarvis, and Sebastian Aho, as while they didn't score, they at least could have had 6 points in this game just by how their performance was and how they were pretty much showing early chemistry that everyone's kind of been excited to see going into the season. Also talking about some of the young guys of Felix, Unger, Sorum, and Nadeau, as there was a jump between preseason game 1 on Monday to the game on Wednesday night. And then finally, Andrei Svechnikov really showed out and kind of made you wonder, is he going to carry that momentum from the playoffs into the season as well? And Jesperi Kotkaniemi, he kind of showed out as well and kind of showed that he wants to be staying as a regular with the Carolina Hurricanes. But before we jump into all of that stuff today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, thankfully, or I wouldn't say really thankfully, but it's good to see that on Wednesday night for the community game where proceeds went to charity and stuff like that for the Carolina Hurricanes, we got to see the debut of a few guys. Mike Riley, on the defensive side of things. Amir Miftakov made his, first game with the Carolina Hurricanes in the preseason. Of course, all these games are really unofficial, but, it's their preseason debuts. And the most important one was Nikolaj Ehlers after the Carolina Hurricanes signed him to that 6-year, $8.5 million over the offseason. Canes fans finally got to see, fly, Nick Ehlers for the first time in a Canes jersey. And you could pretty much tell in this game alone that between Ehlers, Jarvis, and Aho, these guys had instant chemistry, and it made you very excited for the fact of what we could possibly see in the upcoming season. Now, unfortunately, they didn't get any goals because Daniel Tarasov, former Columbus Blue Jacket, stopped pretty much 46 of 49 shots in the game. And there was a good point that, all three of those guys of Aho, Jarvis, and Ehlers, they could have had probably 6 points combined. It's just when it came down to it, Tarasov was finding a way to stop the puck and robbed a lot of these guys' opportunities. But overall, I think with those three alone, just on that first line together, which is what a lot of people are possibly saying that it's going to be that first line going into the season. Talk about shots, overall, they did finish with a combined, they had a combined 13 shots as a group. Of course, Seth Jarvis leading the way with 7, Ehlers is 4, and Sebastian Aho with 2. And of course, Aho, Jarvis did have a couple hits along with Nikolaj Ehlers, and Jarvis, played 20 minutes and 1 second, Aho 19:25, and Ehlers 17 minutes flat. But even on the power play, those guys looked really good together with Andrei Svechnikov and Shayne Gostisbehere, which kind of feels like what that first line is probably going to look like. This is what your first power play and it's going to look like with those 5 together. And just on the first power play opportunity alone, they had at least 4 or 5 opportunities that they could have scored a goal. So they were right on it. They were on top of the Florida Panthers. Now, I know Florida had mainly an AHL roster. That's why they held them to a total of 16 shots and were able to put up 49. And that's even going back to the fact it was 19-2 in the first, 16-6 in the second, and 14-8 in the third. But you saw a lot of those opportunities. You saw Aho finding Ehlers in the high slot, right in front of the goal with some opportunities. Ehlers was finding Jarvis, finding Aho. All three of these guys were finding opportunities to get the puck to each other and get the opportunities to score goals. Like I said, Seth Jarvis led the team with 9 shots in this game. And just for the fact that these three were finding each other super quick, and they were making it hard on the Panthers in their defensive zone. A lot of great forechecking, a lot of pressure, a lot of second, third chance opportunities. It's just Tarasov was on another level tonight. Give him some credit. But those three guys kind of really, gave us a glimpse of what this first line is going to be for the Carolina Hurricanes. And Trip Tracy said it best, and Mike even agree with it on the radio call. Why waste all these goals in the preseason when they're not really going to count? So it's just right now, the main thing for these three guys, especially for Ehlers in his Canes preseason debut, is just trying to find the early chemistry, trying to understand the system, know where everyone's at, and just create the opportunities and just kind of build that chemistry up. Because, you can have chemistry in a practice, in training camp, because Mike Maniscalco said it best on the Wednesday show of Locked On Hurricanes. It's a controlled environment. You can control how the practices go, but you got to do it against another team. That's where you see where's the chemistry, where does the compatibility work with these guys. So that's why for like preseason games like this, I don't get too emotionally like, oh, these, what's going on? It's just relax. It's preseason. That's why I don't get worked up on preseason games. These are to see where guys are at, where their development are at, where it's guys trying to figure out the system, guys who are trying to learn the system if they're new to the team, and just trying to build that chemistry with their line mates. So for me, it's more of just like, those three didn't score any goals or put up any points, but you can see where, even with the few practices they've had together as the C1 group, as the top line, you can see the chemistry is already somewhat there. And it's more exciting to see that. That's what we're going to see when the regular season starts in 14 days. We are 2 weeks from the start of the regular season, ladies and gentlemen. That's how close we are. We are literally 2 weeks away from opening night for the Carolina Hurricanes against the New Jersey Devils. So for me, it's working on chemistry and learning the system, just trying to get ready for game 1 of the regular season. Preseason games be dang at this point. That's why they're dropping these things to 4 next season. It's because it's just trying to get acclimated to the team, to the system, knowing where everyone's out on the ice. And you can see throughout that entire game, 5-on-5, power play, Ehlers, Jarvis, Aho looked like they were pretty much on the same page, and they were fighting each other. They were making chances. They were winning board battles, creating some great passes, great opportunities, but it's just Tarasov was able to stop some pucks. There was some where you thought Jarvis was going to score. You thought Ehlers was going to put one in after an Aho pass right into the high slot in between the faceoff dots. It just didn't go in. But that's what you're kind of looking for, is to see, can these guys find each other? Can these guys create the opportunities? And that's just kind of building towards the start of the season. So, like I said, with games like these, I'm just trying to look for positives, trying to look for, are these guys pushing in the same direction? Are they figuring it out? And for me in this game, for the preseason debut of Nikolaj Ehlers in his first game action with the Carolina Hurricanes, yes, it's not the full bore Florida Panthers roster because they had a lot of their AHL guys, but you still got to see Ehlers make his debut, see him in a Hurricanes jersey, and see him play with that first line, that first power play in it, which is what he wanted to be, and that's where the Carolina Hurricanes brought him in for. So, yeah, they didn't score any points, but they got a good, they got a lot of minutes. Like Ehlers played, he averaged 15.48 last year with the Jets. First preseason game with the Canes, 17 minutes, and that's not even compared to the fact that Aho played over 19, and Jarvis was third on the team in total ice time with 20 minutes and a second. Ehlers is already seeing a jump in his minutes, and that's just preseason. What are we talking about when we're in the regular season? It's like 18, 19 minutes, and that's what we're going to be more concerned about. So overall, I thought these three did great together on the first line. I thought they did really well on the power play together with Svechnikov and Gostisbehere. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to see these guys in live action when points matter, when wins matter, as they strive for the playoffs this upcoming season. Now, compared to Monday's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they lost 2-1, and of course the 4-2 loss on Wednesday night against the Florida Panthers, I think that there was a little bit of a jump, a little bit of a progression when it comes to Felix Unger, Sorum, and Nadeau. So stick around, and I'll talk about those two guys here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. If you're watching the Minnesota Vikings, the LA Chargers, the Carolina Panthers, whoever, there's a lot that you can do to enhance your Sundays with FanDuel. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about Ehlers, Jarvis, and Aho together in their early chemistry. And real quick, I want to talk about the difference in the game from Monday for Felix Unger, Sorum, and Nadeau. Now, I think in that game, they did a pretty good job overall in that Monday game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. There were some, unfortunate turnovers that happened in the game. Of course, with Nadeau, kind of got his pocket picked on the second Tampa Bay goal. It is what it is. And Ryan Henkel said it best. We know Nadeau can score. It's just, can he figure out the other tangibles to his game? Can he figure out his two-way game and hockey IQ and awareness? Because, you can score goals, but in the NHL, especially where we're at now, you have to be head on a swivel. You got to be good on the off-puck movement. And Mike Maniscalco even said it best. You can score, but how is your off-puck movement? How are you playing with off the puck? And are you making sure, where everyone's at and doing what you need to do? So that's kind of what we're looking at for the Carolina Hurricanes, looking at Nadeau. It's we know you can do the scoring part. Can you do everything else? That's what we're trying to see what you can do with that. And Felix Unger, Sorum, I think he did it okay last year with Chicago Wolves, and he was okay in the prospect showcase. But I think you want to see where, where his two-way games at, where you see his offensive side at, because he didn't really put up a lot in Chicago in terms of points and stuff like that. He did okay, but you can tell it was a very big learning curve because it was his first year in North America compared to playing over in Europe. So there was a big learning process for him. And both these guys are still under 20. So it's still, it's still going to take time to let them grow. And Mike said it best. It's, people, let them cook, but maybe some guys just need to bake a little bit longer. And Mike Maniscalco put it perfectly, and I agree with him. There's just some guys that, you want to get them up here, but we're not talking about the Canes of old in the dark ages where these guys are just coming up now because they needed guys like that. Now this team is so loaded, you don't have to have a Nadeau or Unger, Sorum or a Legault or whoever right now in the NHL. Just let them work on their craft. Let them bake a little bit longer in the AHL. But I would say in this game, I think those two really kind of showed that they're kind of taking those next steps, because Nadeau played 16 minutes and 59 seconds. He had 19 shifts in this game. He had 4 shots and 4 hits in this game and a block shot. So it seems like from what I've seen, especially from the prospect showcase where he, with Oasis Weisblatt, he was not afraid to stand up to him. He was not afraid to get a little, chippy and jaw and throw some hits. Seems like over the summer and through the prospect showcase and even through, the couple preseason games in training camp, there's been a little bit more defensive aspects in those games he's working on. There's a little bit more of an extra bite to his game as well. Not Brendan Lemieux biting, but, a little edge to his game. He's not afraid to throw hits. And I think that's what you're kind of seeing is him adding that more physical element to his game, building on that two-way game where it's just go out and score goals. Are you throwing the hits? Are you putting the pressure on the other team to create turnovers? I think that's what you're kind of seeing out of Bradley Nadeau. And I was really impressed for what he did in this game. Him and Svechnikov on that second line, those two had some insane chemistry. Like, they were both fighting each other as the game went on. Svechnikov was a one-man passing crew. You get a pass, you get a pass, you get a pass. Because Svechnikov was trying to find everyone to get a goal. He was finding Bradley Nadeau on the doorstep, and Tarasov was just finding a way to, commit some grand larceny and stopping shots that he was doing. But you can kind of see those two really working together. I think of the fact that you got that power forward mentality of Svechnikov, where, you want him to score the goals, but he's got those other intangibles to create the passes, find open teammates, create opportunities. And Nadeau was just feeding off of what Svechnikov was giving to him. So I think there's some early chemistry with those two guys. Like I said, I really what Bradley Nadeau did. Felix Unger Sorum is really trying to put himself out there as well and try to take those next steps. He was very noticeable on some board battles on the forecheck, and he was putting himself out there as well to impress, show that he can take that next step in his game as well. So, and looking at what Felix Unger Sorum did, he played 13 minutes and 52 seconds, not a lot of ice time, only 16 shifts, but he did have one hit and one shot on goal. And it's a very limited number of time on the ice compared to kind of everyone else. I think when you look at the forwards, he was fifth to the bottom. The only guys who had less ice time than him, Rybkin with 12:42, Eric Robinson 12:16, LeBanc 11:59, and Giovanni Smith with 10:41. Of course, Giovanni Smith did have a 5-minute major for fighting, but those are the four guys that played less minutes than Unger Sorum, and that's even for the entire team. He was fifth from the bottom, because even the least number of ice time for defense was for Himasalmi, 15:32. So while Unger Sorum's minutes weren't really there, and like I said, he only had one shot and one hit, but you can kind of tell that he was doing the off-ice intangibles of, finishing checks, or, going up on the board battles, putting yourself in a good spot to steal passes, or, try to create some, harder lanes for the Panthers to hit the net. So I think that, shot opportunities were very limited when you have a team that put up 49 shots in a game. And his minutes were fifth from the bottom. In terms of the entire roster, you have to do with what you are presented, what you're given. And ice time wasn't a lot, but he still kind of put himself out there. And Trip Tracy noticed that Unger Sorum was, having, a better uptick in his game compared to what was on Monday against Tampa Bay. So it's just slowly, just building and building, keep putting the blocks down, keep putting, that work in day in and day out. Because Rod Brindamore said, and even, when I was talking to Jackson Blake earlier this week, it's just taking it day by day, keep building the blocks, keep adding to your repertoire, keep just building your game overall, and just keep getting better. And I think it's what you're kind of seeing with Felix Unger Sorum, because like I said, he's under 20. He's still a young kid. He's going to have more time to, as Mike puts it, bake in the system. So I think as long as he just keeps growing his game, I think he will be the guy that the Hurricanes drafted not too long ago. It's just, trying to get used to the North American game, because he's had one season in North America. This year, it's just, hey, you're going to go to Chicago, keep learning from Cam Abbott and his staff, and I think, just give him some more time. I think he'll take that next step, and then who knows where we're looking at with him, maybe in 26, 27, or however that works out. But you could definitely tell that there was a little bit of a growth in between Monday's game against Tampa and Wednesday's game against Florida. So it should be very interesting to see how it works out as, training camp goes along. He's going to be part of the C2 group, and, the other 4 preseason games. Where are we looking at come, the next 4 games before we kick everything off in 2 weeks against New Jersey Devils? So it should be very interesting. Now, I did talk about Andrei Svechnikov and what he did with Bradley Nadeau, but there was a lot more to Andrei Svechnikov's game that I definitely want to talk about, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi as well. So stick around and we'll talk about both of those guys here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So I did talk about Andrei Svechnikov a little bit in segment 2 when talking about Bradley Nadeau and his chemistry with him, but overall, it kind of already feels like even in his preseason, showing his first game of this preseason, Andrei Svechnikov is really kind of, he was a big facilitator of passing the puck. He was trying to find everyone. I mean, he did get the assist on the Jesperi Kotkaniemi goal after him and Eric Robinson put a lot of pressure on the Panthers in the corner of their zone on the forecheck, where Robinson got to the first guy, Svechnikov got to the second guy behind the goal and fed it right to Jesperi, who was in the high slot in between the dots and was able to score a goal. So Andrei Svechnikov did get an assist in this game, but I think with what he did, it's like you're kind of feeling, okay, we've been kind of waiting for Andrei to come back to being the Andrei Svechnikov before the ACL injury a couple seasons back. And, at that point, you feel like he was hitting that trajectory of being a guy who was going to break out, be that one of the top power forwards in the game, maybe top 15, top 10, who knows. So, but you've been kind of waiting for him to hit that stride, and you saw how good he played in the playoffs for the Hurricanes. And yes, it's one preseason game, but you kind of have a sense that maybe Andrei is kind of building on top of it. You're kind of seeing that maybe he is taking that, what we've been waiting for the last couple seasons, is hitting the next cylinder, hitting the next gear in his game, because he was, like I said, he looked great on the power play with Ehlers, Aho, Jarvis, and Shayne Gostisbehere. Those 5 guys were putting on a clinic on the power play. Yes, and I know it's the Panthers AHL squad, and they should be absolutely dominating them, but you got to put in the work. You got to find the chemistry. I think those 5 guys worked really well together, and there was a lot of chances that Andrei was creating. In the first period alone, those guys had like 6 minutes and 41 seconds of offensive ice time as a total team as the Carolina Hurricanes. But you're talking about a 5-on-3 where they were absolutely just peppering Tarasov on that first power play. They had like 4 shots alone in that one power play sequence and just hemming the Panthers into their zone. I think just overall, he did get a point in this game. I think Andrei Svechnikov is kind of trying to show that he is ready to take the next step. He had the third most minutes of the forwards at 17:49 at 19 shifts, 4 shots and 2 hits. He was not afraid to put himself out there. I think that's what you kind of saw with Andrei Svechnikov, and that's what I'm excited about for him, because if he takes his playoff performance that we saw, earlier this summer, against New Jersey, Washington, and Florida, if he builds on that and carries it into the 25-26 season, you could be looking at an Andrei Svechnikov that could be hitting 60-plus points. Maybe he is a guy who might score 25 to 30 goals. That's what you kind of want out of Andrei Svechnikov, and just being someone who's a playmaker, being that power forward, being the guy who's going to drive that line. And right now through camp, you're looking at Logan Stankoven as the center. You're looking at Jackson Blake as your right winger. If those are the 3 guys that you're going in, that is a scary second line with, you got Stankoven, who's not afraid to throw the body against anyone. You get Jackson Blake, who's getting more comfortable in what he's doing as a player, because he scored 17 goals as a rookie. That's pretty good to finish top 10 in all of rookies in that, going into his second season with a different mindset to get better. But then you got the power forward playmaking ability of Andrei Svechnikov, who can't score goals, but it really showed, especially in this game, that his passing game he's trying to take that to another level. And I think if that translates to the regular season and builds on the continual upward trend that we saw from the playoffs going into the preseason, takes it into the regular season, we could be seeing the breakout Andrei Svechnikov that we've been kind of waiting for pre-injury to his knee. So it was very exciting to see what Andrei Svechnikov could do, on that second line that he was with, with Kotkaniemi and Nadeau. Those guys were, like I said, they were creating a lot of chances for the Hurricanes. And the fact that we did on the power play with Ghost, Ehlers, Aho, Jarvis. I think Andrei looked really good in this game. Talk about another guy who is trying to find trying to get his role set and trying to like show that, hey, I can, figure this out and take it to what level we need for the Hurricanes. And that's Jesperi Kotkaniemi. He did score the second goal of the game. Absolutely great pass from Andrei to get to him, and he roofed it on Tarasov. Hey, you'll gladly take that. And Chip Tracy put it out. Kotkaniemi looked really good on the PK for the Hurricanes, and it seems like KK wants to kind of throw his name in the hat of being a penalty killer. Yeah, granted, right now you got Aho, Jarvis, you have the Jordans. You do have, maybe Jankowski and Robinson if those guys are a group, but maybe it's like, hey, if you want to give Jarvis or Aho a break, why not use Jesperi Kotkaniemi? And I don't know if they're going to do that, but if Trip Tracy and Mike Maniscalco know that it's like, hey, he's kind of low-key doing all right in the PK group, I think that's someone to keep an eye on. I think for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, I think he's been the fourth line center a lot through training camp. Will that translate to the regular season? Who knows? Does he get his shot back into the 2C spot? Like I said, we're 2 weeks away from figuring that out for opening night. But I think where he knows that he's got to find a role that fits with him, that works for him, to be like, hey, I want to stay in Carolina. I can prove that I can still bring it to this team. It's just if he's not the second line center, maybe he is the fourth line center. Is there other roles that he could take? And if it's the penalty kill, okay, so be it. Is that second power play? He was there. Is that something that he can kind of still etch his way in? Who really knows? But it should be very interesting to see what Jesperi Kotkaniemi does. But he did score a goal in the preseason. He was throwing a lot of hits. He was finding someone. He was someone who's kind of trying to take his game to, trying to figure out for him how to use his body, how to use his size. 17 minutes and 35 seconds of ice time. He was 10 seconds less, fewer than Andrei Svechnikov. 21 shifts, 4 shots, a blocked shot, and 2 hits. So Jesperi Kotkaniemi was kind of pretty much noticeable in this game, and that's kind of what you want out of a guy who's, this is his, he's got this year and 4 more seasons of his contract at $4.82 million. He, there's the question mark of what his role is. Is he the 2C guy? Is he the 4C guy? Because you can't take Jordan Staal out of the 3C, but what can he bring? He wins faceoffs. He's been a little bit more physical, especially over this last season, going, into 24-25. Does he want to be the PK? Does he want to figure out other stuff? There's a lot of what can Jesperi Kotkaniemi do for the Carolina Hurricanes, because they still want to make this work with him with 5 seasons left on his contract, including this year. But overall, I think he did a pretty good job in this preseason game on a line with Svechnikov and Nadeau. And, it'll remain to be seen what happens through the rest of training camp and preseason as well, because, got to find a spot for him, and what's it going to be and what's his role going to be. Those are definitely kind of questions to figure out. But overall, I think Svech did a great job. KK, the same thing. All the guys we kind of talked about tonight, I think they all did a pretty good job, all things considered, minus the loss. Frederick Anderson stopped all 8 shots. Didn't allow a goal in the first 2 periods. Of course, didn't really get a lot of opportunities to see some pucks. But, hey, that's all you can ask for out of your, one of your top 2 goalies in your system going into the season. But like I said, it's preseason. It's really nothing to freak out about. It's not like, oh, is this team going to be okay? It's preseason. They're just trying to figure where everyone's at in terms of figuring out the system and just being chemistry at this point. I think it's going to be fine. Nothing to worry about. And like I said, we're 2 weeks away from the regular season where games actually matter, and that's kind of what I'm waiting for it to get here, because, preseason's great, but we all know regular season is where it's at. I'm excited for us to finally get there. Well, guys, this will be the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL Fantasy Podcast, where Still Roden and Phil Livingston provide daily fantasy tips to give you the edge over your league mates, all while making you a smarter hockey fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you want to keep it with me, I'm at OneShirt on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where if you click the link tree in my bios, You can find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. I've been very, very busy this week with the Jackson Blake feature piece, recaps, takeaways, all of that stuff. We got a lot more coming as we progress through training camp in the preseason. Before you know it, we're doing regular season hockey content over at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Surge Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review, so I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up, tell me if you like the show as well. Share with other Kinks to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Thursday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.